Well, it's also, we share a border with Russia, which is incredible. People don't usually think, you know, Canada, Mexico, and Russia, and there are border stations there, and people cross from Russia to America.
Right.
And so a lot of the early part of my book I spent going to Alaska, and I crossed from Alaska to Chukotka, which is the sort of Rorschach blot double of Alaska on the other side. And
so she could see Russia from her house. Actually.
Well, that I would love to know. I would love to know how she did that, because it took me like 4 trips before the weather was good enough and everything came together so that I actually could. And you can, and it is so cool. Yeah. You're up in a helicopter.
It's not real far, right?
It's like, I think it's 43 miles.
Well, I'd say it's
like
closer
that.
than Cuba is to Florida.
Oh,
right?
much closer.
Significantly
Yeah,
closer.
and I mean, you go up in a helicopter and you see right here is North America, the tip of North America, and right there is the Chukchi Nos, which means the Chukchi nose, right. The very end of Asia. And you see them both, and you feel like a colossus. You know, you're these 2 continents, and and you can see them both, and it's possible. Whether she actually did it, I would still, if I ever had one question to ask I would ask her how she did it.
Don't you think that would be a great casual in the New Yorker, you know, looking for the exact spot where she could see Russia from
Well, I think just from her house,
yeah.
You would have to go up incredibly high. I mean, you'd have to go up in a...
She might have a big dormer.
Yeah, a geosynchronous satellite or something.
How welcoming were the people in Siberia and people just generally over there to the idea of you being over there? You went back, I think you did 5?
I did 5 trips in Siberia, yeah.
How did they find you? How did you find them?
Well, there were 2 things. When I first started going there in '93, people really liked Americans.
Yeah.
And so...
A lot of New Yorker readers over there?
Well, surprisingly, there are a lot of people who've read a lot of our literature. Yeah. So they would ask me questions, and it happened that at the time, I had a couple messages from J.D. Salinger. He didn't call me directly.
You just dropped that into the conversation.
But
huh?
Somebody who I knew at the New Yorker had said, J.D. Salinger has some advice for you. And it was not really very helpful advice, but it was, anyway.
Yes, but it was J.D. Salinger.
I know, and this blew me away. This totally blew me away.
Right.
And
Thomas Pynchon says hello, and
right.
so does Judge Crater, you know, right.
Mr. Sean called me one time, who was the editor of the New Yorker, and he said, J.D. Salinger read this piece that I had done about Heloise, Texas
San Antonio.
native, San Antonio. Right. And he said something like that he had liked it or something, and he wanted you to know. And so I hung up the phone, and I immediately called a friend and said, "My God, J.D. Salinger said this." And the minute I hung up from that call, the phone rang again, and it was Mr. Sean, and he said, that was in confidence. You're not supposed to tell anybody that. And I said, "Well, if you heard the busy signal," he said, "Yes, I did." I said, "Well, you're too late. I already told people." And he said, "Well, everything Mr. Salinger says is in confidence." So I had this...
Did you just bust the confidence just now telling us that...
Well, they're both departed, God bless them, and I think that there's no...
no statute of limitations.
No state secret has been revealed.
So Mr. Salinger...
So I was in Russia, and people were asking me about these various books, and they started asking about J.D. Salinger, and the amount that they knew about J.D. Salinger was staggering. They had read everything by him. They wondered what was up with him, you know, where was he, you know, how come he hadn't written. And this is in Moscow, but still, you know, the amount of knowledge that they had about our writers, or like they'd read Philip Roth, or they'd read, you know, they're very well read, and they love writing. So that...
Well, just think about how we, in the era, which is not really an era, it's almost for most of our lives, we were told they're the other. You know, when we were, when we were demonizing,
right.
They were the other. We were told they were barbarians, and they had no culture, no nothing, and so of course we were led to believe that they wouldn't have known about it. Salinger. Now it turns out, of course, they're just like regular people.
Well, that was another part of my fascination, is that they were like the other side of the mirror when I was growing up, and to see how much we resembled them, and how much they knew about our life, and how much they, you know, sort of idealized it. So this is actually, I'm answering I dropped in that about J.D. Salinger in an answer about how what their reaction was to me. At the beginning, they were very hopeful about what was going to happen in Russia. As time went by and it became clear that it wasn't going to be the democratic, utopia or whatever that they had hoped, I think there was a kind of cynicism crept in. Not that it was uncomfortable, because they're very funny as cynical people, but that in Siberia, you're in country, you're out in the country, and they were very friendly as country people. I have found in America, like people in more rural places are here, and that was always nice, because I never felt, you feel in general very strange being in another culture, but I felt in Siberia that it was like just folks. You could talk to people, and very hospitable people. So it was in that way it was pleasant to travel there.
Did you spend much time elsewhere in the course of your reporting, elsewhere in the country?
I spent a lot of time in Western Russia, yeah, but only in Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Yeah. Do you get a sense that there is any forward rotation, optimism about the future of this country? Because really, they've sort of been diminished as a superpower,
right?
They're diminished as an economic power. There's sort of no there almost. I mean, of course, there is something in terms of mass of land and.
Well, yes, they have been diminished, but in certain areas they've acquired great power, and that's mainly in the area of oil and natural gas, because they're the second largest natural gas reserves in the world after Saudi Arabia, and they are the oil reserves, and they're the natural gas supplier of Western Europe, so that Finland gets 100% of its natural gas from Russia. Germany I think something like 40%. France gets a third, so that. We saw some years ago when they were upset with Ukraine, they just, turned the.
Well, and of course they still
valve.
have, the stuff with Georgia a couple of years ago. But
Right.
It's not as if they're not on our radar screens, but
Right.
it just seems as though they're not really relevant to our lives in the way that they
Well,
once
they're
were.
not the way they were, absolutely.
And even Putin seems like, even the leadership there seems kind of like, second rate. It just doesn't.
Well, there's something kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, but there's something kind of cute about them.
Cute?
Cute. Putin will go and ride, shirtless on some horse, and
I was waiting for the word shirtless. Thank you for getting to shirtless quickly. That's
but
right,
he's in Siberia all the time, which I really like about him. And Medvedev's favorite band is Deep Purple.
Is that right?
That's like almost my favorite fact I learned in the last year.
The key to ending the Cold War, it sounds to me.
This guy,
right.
Smoke on the Water, and this is his favorite band. So, I mean, I think that if we could, I mean, this is just, off the top of my head, but I think if we could get along better with Russia, we could solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, and it sounds like it wouldn't take more than somebody's vinyl collection.
I know. And now they own all the gas stations on the Garden State Parkway near where I live. Lukos, which is the new, it bought Getty, is this big Russian company, and we're getting our gas and oil in New Jersey from, Siberia, technically. That's where Lukoil's wells are. So, I mean, there still are connections.
It's pretty amazing. Well, the book is just such an engrossing read, and it's not every day that you think, oh, I want to read about Siberia.
Well, I really hope to get people interested in it in that way. I mean, I think it's easy to read about the south of France because it's fun,
Oh yeah, well, you go in with a better attitude.
Yeah, but
right.
this I wanted to do something like a Russian novel, like a really big canvas Russian novel, only do it in nonfiction, and it was sort of an experiment almost in nonfiction. Mm-hmm. A big picture as opposed to what nonfiction now usually does, which is to take something small and then expand it to make it explain the world. I wanted to just start with something big.
Well, this is already big. You didn't need to expand it.
Yeah.